Greetings, my dear friends. Just a couple of days back, I put in a small video, a trailer, if you will, of India's toxic neighborhood and how there seems to be a game of thrones going on in our countries, while for India it remains a throne of thorns. Let's take a look at a neighborhood. Starting from the west, my favorite, Pakistan, a perpetual nuisance. I'm not too sure what suits India better, a stable Pakistan or an unstable Pakistan which is very interested in trying to look after itself than bother what happens outside. In reality, an unstable Pakistan is probably a better idea. Yet, Pakistan has a crumbling economy, political instability, water and food shortages, and a growth of terrorism unabated. The ISIS Khorasan and Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan are on the revival. Take China. COVID is back with a bang. The zero COVID policy is fueling even greater public anger. Economic woes continue. Yet, China accelerates its nuclear buildup and its growing assertiveness, whether it is Tibet or the South China Sea, Taiwan or the Senkaku Islands. In fact, it is flexing its muscles as far away as getting almost close to Australia and New Zealand. Nepal, again economic woes. You'll be surprised, luxuries have been banned, and when I say luxuries, it includes kurkure and playing cards. Forex reserves are on the dip, they are at their lowest ever. While there seems to be a semblance of political stability, instability is lurking round the corner, and China is the elephant in the room. In Bangladesh, economic and political stability are visible, yet religious extremism and Islamic terror is rearing its head, manifesting itself in Hindu hate and minority hate. ISIS and ISI are very active in fermenting Islamic fundamentalism. On the other hand, in Myanmar, politically it is stable with the military junta ruling the roost, yet economic sanctions are biting. Aung San Suu Kyi is in jail and the democratic movement is largely quiet. Yet the Rohingya refugee crisis hangs like a Damascus sword. Sri Lanka is effectively broke. It is struggling to stay afloat and out with a begging bowl to the IMF, World Bank, and the countries. It is running out of food, medicines, and fuel. China's debt trap policy is in its glorious exhibition, its numero uno status, if you will, and refugees are landing in India. In Maldives, there was a India Out campaign under the previous president. It seems to have reduced now, yet China continues to ferment trouble. You can see our neighborhood has enough toxicity. Let's try to unravel this, and my dear friends, welcome to Chax Simplifies. I am Commander Chakrapani, or Chax, your host, to simplify complex geopolitical issues into very understandable nuggets. In this episode, we will now take a detailed look at our difficult neighborhood and the Game of Thrones that is in progress here, and see how does India respond to this Game of Thrones with its own version of a Throne of Thorns. Let's do some crystal ball gazing to understand how this will pan out, and let's get started. Let's start with Pakistan. Pakistan has been a Sri Lanka in the making, another Sri Lanka in its economic woes in the making. It's reeling under a $90 billion debt, over 65% of its GDP. Inflation is at over 15%, and the exchange rate of the Pakistani rupee to the dollar is 185, unprecedented. Pakistan reserves are capable of managing only 2 months of imports. China's Belt and Road Initiative and aid accounts for $27.3 billion of this $90 billion debt. It comes with significant conditions. Many of them ensure, for example, the Gwadar port is with China for a 40-year lease. Karachi port, where we have one more project going, is likely to be the next casualty. Virtually all assets of Pakistan have been already pledged to China. Pakistan has approached the IMF but is unable to meet the conditions as laid down by the IMF. It is facing fuel, food, medicine shortages. Yet, its focus remains on Kashmir and the only export it is capable of, terror. Pakistan went through a major political crisis. It actually is continuing with the political crisis. There were rumors that General Bajwa slapped Imran Khan. There were rumors that Imran Khan removed General Bajwa from office. Yet, Imran Khan has become the first Prime Minister to be ousted from Pakistan with a no confidence motion. Despite that, he continues to draw attention. He is invoking the foreign hand theory, speaking about safety of the nuclear weapons in Pakistan and trying to destabilize the government so that he can press for early elections. Shehbaz Sharif has managed to form a government. Will it last? That's $1 million question. Army, for the first time ever, is dealing with an image problem. There have been protests against the army lately, and this is an issue which it needs to rectify as soon as possible. No wonder the army came out to rebut all of Imran Khan's allegations and say the safety of nukes is perfectly fine. Shehbaz Sharif, will he have the political will and the ability to push for IMF conditions? Yet, in Pakistan, sectarian violence is on the rise. The TTP or Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TLP, Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, continue to grow unchecked. The Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan is very active in creating unrest, both sectarian and political. Don't forget, very recently it brought Pakistan to a halt by threatening to mass over 1 million people in Islamabad in October 2021, demanding the release of Saad Rizvi, its leader. Balochistan, on the other hand, is on fire. The Baloch National Army has been hitting Pakistani army camps regularly. As recently as the 26th April, we saw a suicide bombing at the Confucius Institute in Karachi, killing 3 Chinese. A few months back, Chinese engineers were killed. China has threatened to stop all CPEC projects. There are separatist movements in Pakhtunistan of Fatah, in Sindh. Pak-occupied Kashmir is also raising its head and showing signs of unhappiness as far as Pakistan is concerned. Some groups have gone ahead and issued ultimatums to the Pak army to withdraw from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir by 31st May 2023 and stop all CPEC projects. Pakistan was created as a Muslim state. One would expect the Islamic or the Muslim glue would bind over every community there. In reality, that's not happened. There are bombings of the Shia Ahmadiyya mosques every so often. Major bad blood between the Shias and the majority Sunnis. The Sunnis are predominantly aligned to the Deobandi and the Barlawi sects of Sunni Islam. Ahmadiyas are not even recognized as Muslims. Less we talk about others like the Hazaras, the Nur Bakshis, the better it is. The ISIS Khorasan and the TTP have been emboldened so much that they bomb Pakistan and disregard army at will. Very recently, the Pakistan Air Force actually bombed the TTP positions inside Afghanistan, bringing both Pakistan and Afghanistan close to war. In any case, Afghanistan has been tearing down the fences on the Durand line, which Pakistan Army had erected, and has killed a number of Pak soldiers in that area. Taliban and in Afghanistan and Pakistan do not see eye to eye. Let's move on to China. In China, there are a large number of internal problems. I did cover many of them in a previous video. I will provide a link to that in the description. The zero COVID policy has been a failure. Containment strategies are not working. Shanghai is under lockdown for over 3 weeks. Virtually half of Chinese major cities are under some stages of lockdown, some complete, some partial. Yet, financial crisis has not reduced. It is actually deepened with the shutdowns and the lockdowns. IMF recently downgraded the Chinese GDP growth to less than 4.4%. India, on the other hand, is at over 8.2%. Industrial production is down by over 15% with significant job losses. The shutdowns in Shanghai and other cities have made global supply chains even more vulnerable. The Belt and Road Initiative forced lending to nations of over $385 billion. Much of this is unlikely to return because they have been lent to nations with questionable abilities to return. Internal debt of China, as per estimates, is at over 300% of its GDP. Not surprising. Travel bans are in the offing, and the US very recently issued an advisory against travel into China. China is not happy about it. For China, its demographic troubles have not reduced. Look at its aging population and the dramatic reduction in fertility rate to less than 1.2%. Whether it be the persecution of Uyghur and the Hui Muslims or the Tibetans, all of this continues unabated. Food and water scarcity are a reality. So are power cuts and lockdowns, rising prices and job losses, and of course, growing unemployment. The people are unhappy. They traded freedom for economic prosperity, but even that seems to be taking a big hit. Yet, there is a silver lining. Sanctions against Russia could provide a window of opportunity for China to be able to take convenience fees for enabling transactions to Russia. But Chinese external action and external aggression continues. It has been building bases across the region with newfound josh and enthusiasm. For example, the SAM Enterprise Group, owned by the PLA, operating in the aerospace and defense sector, was trying to get 2 islands on a 75-year lease in the Solomon Islands for opportunities to develop naval infrastructure for PLAN, that is PLA Navy. On 19th of April this year, China signed a security pact that will provide a safe harbor for Chinese ships in South Pacific, in the Solomon Islands. What is very interesting is Solomon Islands recognized China switching from Taiwan only in 2019. Australia, New Zealand, and US are not too happy with this pact. Cambodia has leased 20% of its coastline for 99 years to Big Brother Foo's Unite International Group. Fu is a former Pakistan Liberation Army officer linked to the Cambodian elite. Hambantota, you will remember, is on a 99-year lease to China. Colombo port, especially the International Container Terminal, sees 85% Chinese stake. A Chinese submarine docked here as recently as November 2014. There have been attempts by China to take over 3 islands in the Park Bay of Jaffna for a hybrid power project just about 50 kilometers off the Indian border. Nainatevu, Delft, and Analatevu islands. This project, incidentally, is now cancelled. China has not let go in its aggression also. In the Taiwan Straits, J-20s have been making aggressive sorties. Senkaku Islands, South China Sea, provocations continue. The Chinese fishing fleet, which is a de facto occupying force, and the Chinese Coast Guard continue with their incursions. In India, from the bridge over Pengong Tso to mobile towers and hot springs, from incursions in Uttarakhand to kidnapping of Indian nationals in Arunachal, from making new runways and to new missile sites across the LAC and McMahon line, China is aggressive across the spectrum. In the Indian Ocean region, Chinese underwater drones in the Sunda Straits have been sighted. The projects in Park Bay, which I just spoke about, and the docking of submarines in the Colombo port to a ship carrying nuclear material to China in Hambantota as recently as April 2021. The Chinese ambassador's visit to Jaffna Peninsula to woo the locals towards China. All of this continues. Yet, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi came calling at extreme short notice to secure India's backing and the Prime Minister Modi's participation in the SCO and the BRICS summit later this year. China realizes this cannot be successful without Modi's presence there. Moving on to Nepal, relatively stable politically at the moment, but instability is just under the waters. The communist parties are still at loggerheads despite Chinese glue. Don't forget the poor scenes last year when KP Sharma Oli was removed and thereafter Sher Bahadur Dyopa took over as the Prime Minister. Nepal has been dependent on tourism. Post-COVID, this major revenue stream is lost. Forex reserves have dipped to less than $9 billion, their lowest ever, which is just sufficient for 6 months' import. Ukraine war has further increased these pressures with higher fuel and commodity prices. It's facing double-digit inflation. To be able to manage some of these pressures, Nepal went to the extent of banning luxury goods, import of luxury goods. You'll be surprised, even kurkure and playing cards. Yes, simple kurkure and simple playing cards have been banned. Don't be surprised, playing cards alone account for $10 million of annual import bill. Border issues with China have not got resolved. China has not responded to the concerns and continues to occupy areas in the north. KP Sharma Oli's belligerence on Lipule with India has backfired and has become a thorn in bilateral relations with India. The recent visit by Sher Bahadur Dyopa seems to be papering over some of these thorns. Bangladesh, on the other hand, politically and economically is relatively stable. The border issues with India have been largely resolved. Yet, Bangladesh is the second largest importer of Chinese arms in the region, next only to Pakistan. There are reports that China is building a surface to air missile maintenance facility in Bangladesh. Islamic fundamentalists have started targeting Hindu minority all over again, and these attacks have significantly increased in the last 1 year. China seems to be luring Bangladesh into a debt trap and plans to invest over $40 billion in the next 5 years. Its current investment is only $2 billion. Is this the foundation of the new debt trap? Time will tell. Yet, in the as a Damascus sword are the fears of a backlash when CAA and NRC are implemented in India. What will happen to the illegal Bangladeshis in India? Will they be sent back? Will Bangladesh accept them? The Farakka barrage issue, for example, has also not been fully resolved due to divergent positions taken by the West Bengal government. In Myanmar, all seems to be calm. The military junta is in power, situation is stable. The democracy movement is essentially quiet because of the fear of the big bad wolf. Aung San Suu Kyi is in jail. Yet, sanctions from the West have led to shortages and trading partners. They are biting. China is moving back into Myanmar in a big way, offering credit and infrastructure projects. The same first step as far as economic enslavement is concerned. India, on the other hand, continues to engage. India recently transferred INS Sindhuvir to Myanmar. Training and military aid is in progress. Surprisingly, India's supplied Myanmar the most arms it has supplied to any other country in the region. Rohingya Muslim issues continues to fester. And of course, India's interest in the region is the road to the Southeast Asia. It needs Myanmar's government cooperation to keep militant organizations, especially the Naga militants in our northeast, under check, and keep an eye on China. Come down to Sri Lanka now. Sri Lanka faces a major financial crisis. It spent money on all the wrong things. Its foreign debt is over $51 billion. Forex reserves are less than 500 million. As an emergency measure, Sri Lanka ordered a preemptive default on its external loans. As a result, it has to some extent warded off the Chinese debt trap for a short period of time at least. Let's look at what happened here. The number one forex earner for Sri Lanka are the remittances from the Sri Lankans abroad. These remittances have greatly reduced due to COVID and the Ukraine war. Agriculture sector, which is the second largest forex earner, faced a sudden overnight ban on chemical fertilizers in April 2021 and a mandated change to organic fertilizer. This completely killed the tea industry, as much as it did for rice, coconut, and rubber. Harvests of Sri Lanka are down to less than 20% of normal. The third biggest forex earner is the tourism industry. Tourism industry has been in doldrums ever since the April 2019 Easter Sunday bombings. 262 people were killed here. COVID has added to the woes. Rajapaksa came into power promising dramatic reductions in taxes and duties. He won. It shows populism can win you votes, But what happens to the nation? Lankan revenue shrunk by over 50% in the first year alone. Then came the mismanagement of foreign exchange reserves, no contingency planning, and the Chinese opened up the debt trap. 8 billion of the 51 billion is owed to China at interest rates much higher than what they would be paying to IMF or World Bank. Tota is already pledged. Colombo Port, with 85% Chinese ownership, can happen anytime. Don't forget, China refused to take back substandard fertilizer last year and made Sri Lanka pay for it, even if it was dumped into the sea. Yet, China has been missing in action during the current crisis and has not responded to the Lankan request for $2 billion of additional loan or debt restructuring. Sri Lanka kept delaying going to the IMF, fearing conditions. Yet, it is now with the IMF and negotiations are on in Washington with the US to bail out Sri Lanka. Very strict conditions are expected. Political instability is massive. It has true dynastic rule. 6 members of one family are in power. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Mahendra Rajapaksa is the Prime Minister, Basil Rajapaksa, till recently the Finance Minister, Chamal Rajapaksa, Minister of State for Irrigation, all 4 brothers. The next generation, Namal, Shashindra, Yoshita, are all in the waiting. Rajapaksa was voted in power with a very large majority, yet today faces revolt. The threat of a no confidence motion has ensured Parliament is kept at bay. There are moves afoot to impeach the president. Gotabaya Rajapaksa has indicated his willingness to abolish the 20th Amendment, which gave him extraordinary powers while curtailing the powers of the Prime Minister. The extraordinary powers were all at his discretion. His attempts to make a new cabinet have not been received. The population is against the government. The massive protests are on, all shouting, "Go home, Gota." The divided demography, the Sinhalas versus the Tamils versus the Muslims versus the Christians, have all got united with just one objective: remove Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the Rajapaksa clan from power. India has been supporting Sri Lanka and has provided over $2 billion in credit, in line of credit and loan. Additional 500 million has been provided for fuel. India has given 11,000 tons of rice, 2.7 lakh tons of fuel and medicines, and there are talks in progress for additional line of credit, currency swap of up to $2 billion. Sri Lanka clearly needs much more to stabilize. The Maldives are a very strategically located islands. They are right on the major shipping lanes and, for China, a major link in the string of pearls strategy. India traditionally had good relations with Maldives, except under Abdullah Yameen, who was the president from 2013 to 2018. He started the anti-India sentiment with the campaign called India Out. Returned to Dhruv helicopters which were given as a gift. He joined the BRI with China and borrowed heavily from China for development of infrastructure. He facilitated the growth of the terror hub funded by the Islamists. Presently, the Soleh government, which came into power in 2018, has mended these relations and has reciprocated to India's neighborhood first policy with an India first policy. Of late, India has given $500 million in aid to enhance connectivity, with 100 million as grant and 400 million as line of credit. It is assisting setting up of the Coast Guard of Maldives, Coast Guard stations, radars, etc. for surveillance. China continues to fish. It has partially suspended loan repayments for 4 years due to COVID and was of late trying to take over some islands of Maldives to relocate the hybrid energy project that was cancelled from Sri Lanka. Presently, this is on a back burner. So you can see, my dear friends, our nation, our region is in a mess. There is increasing unrest across our neighborhood. Internal and external pressures are numerous. Pakistan and China are on the margins of a civil war. Nepal faces economic instability. China itself is threatened internally and is lashing out externally. Heads have started rolling. Imran Khan was the first. There will be many others that will follow. Interestingly, this crisis has given India the much needed opportunity to regain its preeminent status, which has been encroached upon by China lately. India's position and initiatives with the vaccine Maitri, economic assistance, positive policies which do not seek to enslave but to enrich, have found friends in the people. The Chinese hegemony and interference in internal matters is on the rise. Whether it is economic colonization in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal, political enslavement in Pakistan and Nepal, constant wooing and creating of unrest, Nepal, Bangladesh, Maldives, and it has been accused of sponsoring internal disturbances and even inside India. The Wuhan virus and the Ukraine war have further aggravated the crisis in the region. India is emerging as a leader, a problem solver. From the HCQ to medicines, where India sent free medicines to over 40 countries during COVID, it's manufacturing vaccines for the world, having delivered over 175 million doses to over 98 countries. It is actively participating in the chip manufacture and to get global supply chains to relocate to India and become a part of them. And today is addressing the consequences of the famine fears as a result of the Ukraine war. Don't forget, Russia is the largest wheat supplier. Ukraine alone accounts for 10% of the wheat market. India is willing to fill those shoes. This undoubtedly will pitch India into a direct confrontation with China that aspires to be the numero uno in not just this region, but also the world. India itself will need to be vigilant, whether it is to ward off any economic debt crisis or the threat of internal disturbances and riots, attempts by China to build bases and projects near India. How will this play itself out as the new world order is emerging? Who will be the global players? Will India figure in one of them? So, my dear friends, we continue to live in very interesting times. If you approve of the video, please do leave a like and please do comment. This motivates me immensely. As always, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you have not already subscribed, and press the bell icon to be notified of new videos. Do feel free to share this video with your friends. As always, I look forward to your suggestions and continued support. Until next time, Jai Hind.